Regret is a slow poison, one that seeps into your bones and lingers, refusing to fade with time. Looking back now, I can see the exact moment my world began to unravel. 5 years ago, I made a choice, one that would define me, haunt me, and change the course of my life forever. At the time, I was blind to the devastation I was about to cause. I was restless, craving something I couldn't even put into words. I had everything: a loving husband, a stable life, a man who adored me more than I deserved. And yet, it wasn't enough. Luke was the kind of man women dream of marrying. Kind, devoted, patient. For 3 years, he had loved me unconditionally, showering me with affection and support. He worked tirelessly to build a future for us, but in my twisted perception, I convinced myself that his dedication was neglect. I mistook stability for monotony, devotion for distance. And in my selfish search for excitement, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I sought validation in the wrong place, turned to a coworker who made me feel seen in a way I foolishly thought was missing. It began innocently, harmless conversations, inside jokes, fleeting glances. But what started as an illusion of friendship soon spiraled into something that could never be undone. When Luke found out, the look in his eyes shattered me. He didn't yell, didn't rage. He just stared at me with a quiet devastation that was far worse than any outburst could have been. "Why wasn't I enough?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I had no answer. No excuse that could justify the pain I had inflicted on him. And so, the man who once saw me as his world packed his things and walked away, leaving behind only silence and the crushing weight of my own choices. The years that followed were a blur of regret and emptiness. I threw myself into work, into meaningless relationships, into anything that could distract me from the ache in my chest. But nothing filled the void. Every smile, every laugh, every fleeting moment of happiness was overshadowed by the ghost of what I had lost. I tried to reach out, but Luke had moved on. We divorced soon after, and I convinced myself that the best thing I could do for him was to disappear from his life completely. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. I was sitting in a coffee shop, scrolling through my phone absent-mindedly, when I saw him. Luke. He walked in, looking even more handsome than I remembered, but something about him was different. He carried himself with an air of quiet confidence, a sense of peace that I hadn't seen in him before. And then, before I could decide whether to hide or run, our eyes met. For a brief moment, the world stood still. Then, his expression softened, and to my surprise, he walked toward me. "Anna," he said, his voice steady. My throat tightened. "Hello, Luke." He gestured to the empty chair across from me. "Mind if I sit?" I nodded, my heart pounding as he settled into the seat. Up close, I noticed the faint lines around his eyes, the way time had shaped him into someone even more composed, more self-assured. He wasn't angry. He wasn't broken. He was just settled. "It's been a long time," he said after a moment. "Yeah," I managed. "It has." Silence stretched between us before I finally asked the question that had haunted me for years. "How have you been?" A small, unreadable smile tugged at his lips. "Life is good now." His words, though gentle, felt like a dagger to my heart. I was happy for him, I truly was, but hearing it out loud made the finality of it all hit harder. "I'm glad," I whispered. "You deserve it." Another pause, heavier this time. Then, Luke leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing. "Why did you do it, Anna?" The question knocked the air from my lungs. My hands trembled, my eyes burned, and for the first time in years, I let the truth spill out. "I don't know," I admitted, voice raw with regret. "I was selfish. I was insecure. I thought I needed something else, but I was wrong. I see that now. And I'm so sorry." He nodded slowly, his face unreadable. "I spent years trying to understand it," he said. "At first, I was angry. I wanted to hate you, but I couldn't. You were my wife, Anna. I loved you." His voice caught, and for a split second, I saw the ghost of the man I had shattered. Then, just as quickly, he shook his head, pushing the past away. "I loved you more than anything, and you broke me." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "I know," I whispered. "I hate myself for it. Every single day. If I could go back, I would change everything. But I can't." Luke exhaled deeply, his expression softening. I forgave you, Anna. My breath hitched. Not for you, he continued, but for me. Holding on to that pain was destroying me. Letting it go was the only way I could move on. His words, though kind, stung in a way I wasn't prepared for. He had forgiven me, but forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. He had moved forward. And I was still standing in the ruins of my past. Are you happy now? I asked, barely above a whisper. Luke gave me a small, bittersweet smile. I am. I found someone. Someone I can trust. Someone who loves me. We're expecting our first child soon. The weight of his words settled heavily on my chest, but for the first time, I didn't feel jealousy or bitterness, just a quiet, aching acceptance. He had built a life that I would never be a part of, but he was happy. And that had to be enough. That's wonderful, Luke, I said, forcing a smile through my tears. I'm so happy for you. He stood, his chair scraping against the floor, and for a brief moment he hesitated. I hope you find peace too, Anna, he said. You need to let go of the past. I have. And just like that, he turned and walked away. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair, tears streaming down my face. I knew deep down that this was the last time I would ever see him. Luke had forgiven me. But now, I had to do the hardest thing of all. I had to forgive myself. Only then could I truly begin again.